The bourbon burned just right as I watched the city lights flicker below my penthouse window. 45 years old, and I was about to give a speech celebrating my wife's greatest achievement, built entirely on my money. The irony wasn't lost on me. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My phone buzzed. A text message to Beatrice from an unsaved number. A photo that left nothing to the imagination. Dr. Grant's face was clearly visible, along with parts of him I'd rather not think about. I wasn't surprised. Just tired. "Arthur, darling, are you ready?" Beatrice swept into the room like she owned it, which technically she didn't. I did. The penthouse, the cars, the 7-figure investment in her dermatology clinic, all mine. But Beatrice had a way of making everything feel like her personal kingdom. She looked stunning in her black designer dress, the one that cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her auburn hair was perfectly styled, her makeup flawless. At 38, she still turned heads. Unfortunately, she'd been turning them toward Dr. Grant Hilder for the past 6 months. "Almost," I said, taking another sip of bourbon. "Just reviewing my notes." She glanced at my phone, still displaying the explicit photo. Her face didn't even twitch. "You should really be more careful about what you look at, Arthur. Someone might get the wrong idea." The audacity was breathtaking. "You're right. I should be more selective about what I invest my time in." She missed the double meaning entirely, already focused on her reflection in the window. "The clinic opening is going to be perfect. All the major donors will be there, plus the medical board representatives. This is my moment, Arthur." "Your moment. Built with my capital, my connections, my years of venture capital experience. But sure, Beatrice, your moment." "I'm proud of what you've accomplished," I said. And I meant it. The clinic was impressive. State-of-the-art equipment, prime downtown location, staff poached from the city's best medical practices. It was also hemorrhaging money faster than a severed artery. But Beatrice didn't need to worry about that. She had me. The ride to the clinic was quiet. Beatrice spent the entire time on her phone, texting someone who made her smile in ways I hadn't seen in months. I stared out the window, watching the city I'd helped build through strategic investments and calculated risks. The clinic buzzed with energy. Servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while the city's medical elite mingled with potential investors. Everything gleamed: white marble floors, glass walls, modern art that cost more than most people's cars. Dr. Grant Hilder worked the room like he owned it. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He was a skilled surgeon, I'd give him that. He was also sleeping with my wife and spending my money like it was his personal allowance. "Arthur," he approached with that politician's smile, hand extended. "Incredible turnout tonight. Beatrice has really outdone herself." "She has a talent for spending," I replied, shaking his hand just hard enough to make him wince. His smile faltered slightly. "Well, investment is the foundation of any successful venture." "Foundation," I smiled back. Interesting choice of words. The speeches began at 8. The medical board representative spoke about innovation in dermatological care. A few major donors praised Beatrice's vision. Then it was my turn. I walked to the podium, looking out at the crowd of faces, some familiar, some new, all expecting the usual supportive husband routine. The lights were warm, the audience attentive. Beatrice beamed from the front row, Dr. Grant beside her. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Arthur Sterling, and I have the unique privilege of being married to tonight's star, Dr. Beatrice Sterling." Polite applause. Beatrice's smile widened. When Beatrice first told me about her dream to open this clinic, I knew I had to support her vision. After all, what's the point of having money if you don't invest it in the people you love? More applause. I caught Dr. Grant whispering something to Beatrice that made her giggle. I've learned a lot about the medical field through this process, about dedication, precision, and the importance of a strong foundation. Without a solid foundation, even the most beautiful building will crumble. The applause was more scattered now. Some people sensed a shift in tone. So, here's to Dr. Beatrice Sterling and her incredible team. May your success be built on something more lasting than good intentions and other people's money. I raised my glass, took a sip, and returned to my seat. The applause was polite but confused. Beatrice's smile looked frozen. She took the podium next, her voice bright and confident. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate this incredible milestone. I couldn't have done this without the support of so many people. She gestured toward me, especially my husband Arthur, who's been such a good sport about everything. You know, I always tell people that Arthur is my practice husband, my first, but certainly not my last. The room erupted in laughter. My face burned, but I kept smiling. Arthur taught me so much about business and investment. Consider him my training wheels. Useful while you're learning, but eventually you need to take them off to really soar. More laughter. Dr. Grant was grinning openly now. Beatrice reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. Speaking of taking off the training wheels, Arthur, I have something for you. She walked over and handed me the envelope in front of everyone. Divorce papers, she announced cheerfully. I figured this was the perfect venue. After all, this represents my new beginning. The room went silent. Cameras flashed. Several donors were recording with their phones. I opened the envelope with steady hands, scanning the legal documents inside. She'd been planning this for months. I stood up slowly, the papers in one hand, my champagne glass in the other. The silence was deafening. Well, I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. Here's to being the foundation everyone walks on. Thank you all for witnessing this educational moment. I drained my champagne, set the glass on a nearby table, and walked out. Behind me, the murmur of shocked conversation began to build. The valet brought my car around quickly, probably eager to get me away from the scene. I drove home in silence, my mind already shifting into the cold, calculating mode that had made me successful in venture capital. By the time I reached my penthouse, I'd made 3 decisions. First call. Michael, it's Arthur. I need you to pull my investment from Beatrice's clinic. All of it. Tonight. Arthur, that's $7 million. Are you sure? Completely sure. Trigger the immediate withdrawal clause in our agreement. I want every penny out of their accounts by morning. That'll destroy their cash flow. That's the point. Second call. Davidson Properties? This is Arthur Sterling. I need to invoke the repayment on demand clause on the commercial lease for 1247 Medical Plaza. Yes, the dermatology clinic. Effective immediately. Sir, that building is leased through your shell company. Are you sure you want to? I'm positive. Send someone over tonight with the closure notice. Third call. Dr. Williams? Arthur Sterling. I have some concerns about professional conduct at the new Sterling Dermatology Clinic that I think the medical board should investigate. I poured myself another bourbon and ordered Chinese takeout. The city lights looked different now, sharper, more focused, like looking at the world through a rifle scope. My phone started ringing at 9:30. Beatrice's number flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then Dr. Grant called. Also ignored. Then Beatrice again. By 10:15, I'd received 37 calls and 42 text messages. The Chinese food arrived at 10:30, and I was settling in to eat when someone pounded on my door. I opened it to find a nervous-looking man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard. Mr. Sterling, I'm from Davidson Properties. I have a notice of immediate closure for the Sterling Dermatology Clinic due to breach of lease agreement and insufficient funds. I took the papers, signed the receipt, and handed him a $50 tip. Thank you for the prompt service. As he walked away, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Arthur. Beatrice's voice was shrill with panic. What did you do? The clinic's accounts are frozen, and some man just showed up with papers saying we have to close immediately. Sounds like a rough night, I said, taking a bite of lo mein. This isn't funny. You can't just… Actually, I can. It's my money, my building, and apparently I'm just the practice husband. Consider this your final exam. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then, we need to talk. No, I said. We really don't. I hung up and turned off my phone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was going to enjoy my Chinese food and plan the next phase of my education in revenge. The foundation was cracking, and I was just getting started. The boxing gym smelled like sweat, determination, and broken dreams. It wasn't the kind of place Beatrice would ever set foot in voluntarily, which made it perfect for our meeting. Dorian Martinez had owned Southside Boxing for 20 years. We'd been friends since college, back when I was scrappy and hungry instead of rich and supposedly soft. He was the only person who still called me Artie and meant it. Your wife's been calling here all morning, Dorian said, wrapping my hands for a training session. Left 4 messages with Rosa at the front desk. What did you tell her? That you'd be here at noon if she wanted to talk. He grinned, showing the gap where he'd lost a tooth in his amateur days. Figured you might want to have this conversation on your turf for once. Smart man. I'd been coming here twice a week for 5 years, ever since the stress of building Beatrice's medical empire started eating at me. She thought I was getting soft, playing businessman instead of staying sharp. She had no idea that I could still drop most men half my age. The heavy bag felt good under my gloves. Each punch was precise, controlled, carrying the weight of 24 hours of humiliation. My phone had recorded 63 missed calls before I turned it off. The clinic staff had been calling too. Apparently, nobody could access payroll, the equipment lease payments had bounced, and the medical supply companies were demanding immediate payment. You really pulled everything out? Dorian asked, holding the bag steady. Every penny. Jab, cross, hook. 7 million in operating capital gone. The building lease terminated. Even the parking contract, I own that too. Damn, Artie, you don't mess around. 20 years of marriage and she called me practice, in front of cameras. Uppercut, cross, hook. Said I was training wheels she needed to remove. So you removed yourself first. I removed the foundation. Let's see how well her empire stands without it. At 11:50, Rosa knocked on the gym door. Arthur, honey, your wife is here. She's not dressed for this place. That was an understatement. Beatrice stood in the gym's entrance wearing a cream-colored designer suit and heels that cost more than most people's rent. Her makeup was perfect, but I could see the strain around her eyes. She looked completely out of place among the heavy bags and sweaty fighters. Arthur. She stepped carefully across the worn mats, trying not to let her heels catch. We need to discuss this situation like adults. Sure. I pulled off my gloves and grabbed a towel. Dorian, give us some privacy? He nodded and headed toward the office, but I knew he'd be listening. Good. I wanted a witness. This is ridiculous, Beatrice said, gesturing around the gym. Why are we meeting here? Because this is real. No pretense, no performance, no cameras. Just us and the truth. She tried to maintain her composure, but cracks were showing. Arthur, I know you're upset about last night, but you're overreacting. The divorce doesn't have to be hostile. Hostile? I laughed, and the sound echoed off the concrete walls. Beatrice, you humiliated me in front of 100 people, handed me divorce papers like a party favor, and called me your practice husband. But I'm the one being hostile? It was just a joke. People understood that. Really? Because my phone has been ringing nonstop with people who seem to take it pretty seriously. She shifted uncomfortably, her heel catching slightly on the rubber matting. Look, we can work this out. The clinic just needs some temporary support until we secure additional investors. The clinic is closed. It doesn't have to be. You can reverse the lease termination, restore the funding. Why would I do that? The question hung in the air. Beatrice stared at me like I'd asked why water was wet. Because we're married. Because you invested in my dream. We were married. You filed for divorce, remember? And I didn't invest in your dream, Beatrice. I invested in our future. Turns out you had a different definition of our. Her composure finally cracked. Fine, yes, I'm involved with Grant. But that doesn't mean you have to destroy everything I've worked for. Everything you worked for? My voice stayed level, but I felt the familiar, cold focus settling over me. Let me tell you what you worked for, Beatrice. You worked for spending my money. You worked for taking credit for my connections. You worked for building your reputation on my foundation, then kicking it out from under yourself? That's not $7 million, Beatrice. That's what I put into your clinic. $7 million of my money, earned through 15 years of venture capital deals you never bothered to understand. The building? Mine? The equipment leases? Guaranteed by my credit. The staff you poached from other practices, hired with signing bonuses I funded? She was crying now, mascara starting to run. Arthur, please. The medical board is investigating your professional conduct. Apparently, someone reported irregularities in your drug sample inventory and questions about patient billing practices. Her face went white. You didn't. I did. Because you know what? When you're married to someone for 20 years, you learn things. Like how you've been skimming samples to give to your high-paying cosmetic clients. Like how you've been billing insurance companies for procedures Grant performed without proper supervision. That's standard practice. No, it's fraud. And now it's documented. The gym door opened and Dr. Grant walked in. He looked even more out of place than Beatrice. Expensive suit, perfect hair, the kind of soft hands that had never thrown a punch in their life. There you are, he said to Beatrice, then looked at me with barely concealed contempt. Arthur, I think we need to discuss this situation rationally. Do we? I stepped closer to him. Grant was taller, but I had 40 pounds of muscle on him and 20 years of experience dealing with entitled pricks. This tantrum of yours is affecting innocent people, he continued. The clinic staff, the patients who need care. Innocent people like you? His jaw tightened. I don't know what Beatrice told you, but she didn't tell me anything. She didn't have to. I pulled out my phone and showed him the photo from last night. Nice technique, by the way. Very professional. Grant's face flushed red. You have no right. I have every right. That's my wife you're screwing, in the apartment I pay for, wearing the watch she bought you with my money. Arthur, stop, Beatrice pleaded, but I was just getting started. Tell me, Grant, what's your plan now? The clinic's closed, the accounts are frozen, and the medical board is asking questions. Still think Beatrice is worth the investment? Grant looked between us, and I saw the exact moment he realized the gravy train had derailed. His expression shifted from anger to calculation to barely concealed panic. This is temporary, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Once you calm down, I am calm. I stepped closer, close enough that he had to look up to meet my eyes. This is me calm. You really don't want to see me angry. Grant's hands trembled slightly. Are you threatening me? I'm educating you. See, you thought you were smart, seducing the rich doctor's wife, getting access to all that lovely money, but you made one crucial mistake. What's that? I smiled, and it wasn't a nice smile. You forgot that the rich doctor's wife was never rich. I am. Without warning, I slapped him. Not hard enough to cause real damage, but hard enough to snap his head to the side and leave a red mark on his cheek. The sound echoed through the gym like a gunshot. That's for the disrespect, I said calmly. Next time, it'll be worse. Grant stumbled backward, hand pressed to his cheek, eyes wide with shock. You hit me! Barely. But I can do better if you'd like a demonstration. Beatrice grabbed Grant's arm. We should go. Yes, I agreed. You should. And Grant? That Porsche you've been driving? The one Beatrice bought you? Check the parking lot on your way out. They left quickly, Beatrice's heels clicking frantically on the concrete floor. Through the gym's windows, I watched them discover Grant's car, or what was left of it. The tires were slashed, the paint keyed from front to back, and someone had used a crowbar on the windshield. Dorian appeared beside me, grinning. Damn, Artie. Remind me never to piss you off. That wasn't me, I said truthfully. Must have been some random vandalism. This is a rough neighborhood. Right. Random vandalism. Got it. My phone buzzed with a text from my lawyer. Beatrice filed an emergency injunction to restore clinic funding, also suing for defamation, emotional distress, and breach of fiduciary duty. This is going to get ugly. I texted back, good. Let her try to prove damages when she's the one who filed for divorce and publicly humiliated me. Countersue for fraud, adultery, and misuse of marital assets. Another text, this one from my finance guy. Local news picked up the story. Medical power couple's bitter split leaves clinic in ruins. Your phone's been ringing all morning. Reporters want comments. I turned to Dorian. Want to see something fun? Always. I called the reporter whose number my finance guy had forwarded. This is Arthur Sterling. I understand you want to comment about my wife's clinic closing? Mr. Sterling, yes, we're trying to understand what happened. The clinic opened with such fanfare and now my wife is learning the difference between building something and destroying it. When you base your empire on someone else's foundation, you better make sure they want to keep supporting you. Are you saying this is retaliation for the divorce? I'm saying this is education. My wife called me her practice husband in front of 100 people and handed me divorce papers at her clinic opening. She said I was training wheels she needed to remove. So I removed myself and everything I brought to the relationship. That seems rather harsh. Harsh would be leaving her with the bills for the clinic she built on my credit. I'm being generous by making it someone else's problem. I hung up and looked at Dorian. By tonight, everyone in the city will know exactly what happened and why. You're enjoying this? I'm getting started. The viral video appeared on social media at 3 a.m, 48 hours after the clinic opening. Someone had recorded Beatrice at what looked like a staff party, drunkenly ranting about me to anyone who would listen. Arthur thinks he's so smart, she slurred into the camera, champagne glass in hand. But he's just a glorified accountant who got lucky in tech. I'm the one with the medical degree. I'm the one who built this practice. He's just the money. The video had been viewed 50,000 times by morning. By noon, it was at 200,000. The local news stations picked it up by evening, and suddenly, everyone in the city's medical community was talking about Dr. Beatrice Sterling's public meltdown. I watched it from my penthouse office, sipping coffee and reading the morning news on my tablet. The headlines were brutal. Practice husband pulls plug on wife's medical dreams. Dermatology clinic closes after bitter divorce drama. When marriage and medicine don't mix. My phone rang. The caller ID showed my old friend Marcus Webb, a cardiologist who ran one of the city's most successful private practices. Arthur, Jesus Christ, what happened? The whole medical community is talking about you and Beatrice. She filed for divorce and publicly humiliated me. I responded appropriately. By destroying her clinic? Come on, man. That's a little extreme, don't you think? I set down my coffee cup carefully. Marcus and I had been friends for 10 years. I'd invested in his practice expansion, recommended him to wealthy clients, even played golf with him every month. But I could hear something in his voice. Judgment, disapproval. Extreme? Marcus, she called me her practice husband in front of investors and handed me divorce papers at her clinic opening. Then she made a video calling me a glorified accountant. But I'm being extreme? Look, I get that you're hurt, but think about the bigger picture. The medical community is small. People are going to remember this. Good. They should remember what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. Arthur, listen to yourself. You sound like a vindictive. I hung up. Within an hour, 3 more friends had called with similar messages. Dr. Patricia Chen, who I'd helped secure a loan for her pediatric practice. Tom Rodriguez, a plastic surgeon whose wife and I had served on charity boards together. Even my golf partner, Mike Davidson, called to express his concerns about my behavior. The message was clear. I was being unreasonable. Beatrice was the victim. I was the villain. By the end of the week, the social ostracism was complete. The country club stopped returning my calls about tea times. Charity board meetings I'd attended for years suddenly had schedule conflicts when I tried to confirm my attendance. Dinner invitations dried up. Even my regular poker game found reasons to exclude me. The final straw came at the medical center's annual fundraising gala. I'd been attending for 8 years, contributing 6 figures annually to their research programs. This year, I bought my usual table and arrived alone. The whispers started the moment I walked in. Groups of people I'd known for years suddenly found their conversations fascinating when I approached. The few who acknowledged me did so with the kind of polite distance usually reserved for recently divorced men who might be contagious. I was standing at the bar when Marcus approached with Tom Rodriguez and Patricia Chen. The 3 of them looked like an intervention committee. "Arthur," Marcus said, his voice carefully neutral, "we need to talk." "Do we?" "This situation with Beatrice has gone too far," Patricia said. "She's a respected physician, and you've destroyed her reputation over a personal dispute." A personal dispute. I kept my voice level, but I could feel the familiar cold focus settling in. Is that what we're calling adultery and public humiliation now? "Marriage problems happen," Tom said, "but you don't solve them by ruining someone's career." "I didn't ruin her career. I stopped funding it. There's a difference." "Come on, Arthur," Marcus said. "You know the medical community is watching this. The way you've handled this reflects poorly on all of us." "All of us?" "The people who supported you, who considered you a friend," Patricia said. "We're getting questions about our association with you." I looked at the 3 of them, people I'd helped, supported, invested in, people I'd considered friends, and those questions concern you. "Of course they do," Tom said. "We have reputations to protect, practices to run. We can't be associated with this kind of vindictive behavior." Vindictive behavior. I repeated the words slowly. Let me make sure I understand. When Beatrice publicly humiliated me, committed adultery, and called me her practice husband, that was just marriage problems. But when I stopped giving her my money, that's vindictive behavior. "You're twisting this around," Marcus said. "No one's saying what she did was right, but your response was disproportionate." Was it? She took 20 years of my support, my money, my connections, and threw them away for a surgeon with good hair. But I'm supposed to keep funding her lifestyle out of politeness? "You're supposed to handle it like a gentleman," Patricia said. The word hit me like a physical blow. A gentleman, code for take the abuse, pay the bills, and shut up about it. I see. I looked around the ballroom, at all the faces carefully not looking in our direction. And if I don't handle it like a gentleman? The 3 of them exchanged glances. Marcus cleared his throat. "Arthur, we value our friendship with you, but we can't support this behavior. The medical community has standards that apparently don't apply to adultery or public humiliation, just to the response to those things." "That's not what we're saying." "It's exactly what you're saying." I set my drink on the bar and looked at each of them in turn. You know what? You're right. The medical community does have standards, and I'm about to demonstrate what happens when you apply them selectively. I walked away from them, through the ballroom full of people who had suddenly decided I was toxic. But I wasn't angry. I was calculating. By the time I reached my car, I'd made several decisions. First, I called my investment manager. Pull my funding from Webb Cardiology, Rodriguez Plastic Surgery, and Chen Pediatrics immediately. Arthur, that's going to cause serious problems for their practices. That's the point. Also, cancel my pledge to the medical center's research fund. All of it. That's $500,000. Was $500,000. Now it's nothing. Second, I called my lawyer. I want you to review every contract, every investment, every business relationship I have with anyone in the medical community. If they've taken a position against me in this divorce, I want to know exactly how much leverage I have over them. Arthur, this could be seen as retaliatory. It is retaliatory. Document everything. Third, I called a private investigator I'd used for business due diligence. I need comprehensive background checks on Dr. Marcus Webb, Dr. Tom Rodriguez, and Dr. Patricia Chen. Financial records, professional conduct, personal relationships. Everything. How deep do you want me to dig? Deep enough to find whatever they don't want found. Everyone has secrets. The war was expanding, but I was ready for it. They wanted to see vindictive behavior. I'd show them what vindictive looked like when you had the resources and motivation to do it properly. The medical community was about to learn the same lesson Beatrice had. When you build your success on someone else's foundation, you better make sure they want to keep supporting you. And I was done supporting people who considered loyalty a weakness and revenge a character flaw. The real education was just beginning. The private investigator's report arrived on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after the medical center gala. 200 pages of financial records, professional complaints, and personal indiscretions that painted a very different picture of my former friends. Dr. Marcus Webb, the cardiologist who'd lectured me about proportionate responses, had been skimming from his practice's research fund to cover gambling debts. Dr. Patricia Chen had been prescribing unnecessary procedures to boost her revenue, and the state medical board had received 2 complaints that were quietly buried. Dr. Tom Rodriguez was having an affair with his office manager while his wife battled cancer. But the most interesting discovery was about someone I hadn't even been investigating. Scarlett Morrison, Beatrice's best friend and supposed confidant. Scarlett had been quietly buying up the clinic's debt through a shell company, positioning herself to take control of the practice once Beatrice inevitably defaulted. She'd also been feeding information to the medical board about Beatrice's prescription irregularities, not to protect patients, but to accelerate the clinic's collapse so she could acquire it cheaply. The woman who'd been consoling Beatrice through our divorce, who'd been publicly supporting her against my vindictive behavior, had been orchestrating her destruction from the beginning. It was beautiful in its complexity, and it gave me exactly the leverage I needed. I called Marcus first. Arthur, I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about our conversation at the gala, and I think we got off on the wrong foot. Have you? That's interesting timing, considering I just received some fascinating information about your practice's financial management. The line went quiet for a long moment. I'm not sure what you mean. The West Side Casino, specifically your gambling debts there. Also, specifically how you've been covering those debts with money from your research fund. That's not... Arthur, I can explain. I'm sure you can. The question is whether you'll be explaining it to me or to the medical board. Another long pause. What do you want? I want you to call Beatrice and apologize for your comments about my behavior. I want you to publicly acknowledge that I had every right to withdraw my financial support from her clinic, and I want you to do it today. Arthur, come on. Today, Marcus. Or tomorrow, the medical board gets a very detailed report about your creative accounting practices. He made the call within an hour. Patricia and Tom received similar ultimatums, backed by equally damaging evidence. By the end of the day, all 3 had publicly reversed their positions on my divorce response. But Scarlett was a different kind of target. She required a more sophisticated approach. I arranged to meet her at the Meridian Hotel's bar, downtown's most visible social venue. She arrived precisely on time, looking perfectly composed in a navy business suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Arthur," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "This is unexpected. I have to say I'm surprised you wanted to meet. I thought it was time we had an honest conversation." She signaled the waitress for a martini. "About Beatrice? Arthur, I know you're angry, but she's been devastated by everything that's happened. The clinic closure, the public humiliation, losing her medical reputation. Losing her medical reputation to you, specifically." The martini arrived, and Scarlett took a careful sip before responding. "I'm not sure what you mean." I slid a folder across the table. "Morrison Holdings, LLC, your shell company. The one that's been quietly purchasing the clinic's debt at 30 cents on the dollar." Her hand tightened almost imperceptibly on the martini glass. "I don't know what you're talking about." Also, the anonymous tips to the medical board about Beatrice's prescription practices. Very detailed tips, the kind that could only come from someone with inside access to her patient files. "That's absurd." "Is it? Because I have phone records showing 17 calls between your personal cell phone and Dr. Williams at the medical board over the past 6 months, all made during business hours when you were supposedly consoling Beatrice about her marriage problems." Scarlett set down her drink and looked at me with new respect. "You've been busy." "I've been thorough. The question is, what do we do about it? What do you want?" "I want to watch you explain to Beatrice exactly how her best friend has been destroying her life for profit." "And if I refuse?" "Then I expose everything. Your shell company, your manipulation of the medical board, your plan to acquire the clinic. I also share some interesting information about your previous business ventures, specifically the Medicare fraud case in Denver that you managed to avoid prosecution for by testifying against your partners." Her face went pale. "How did you—" "Money opens doors, Scarlett. And I have a lot of money." She was quiet for a long moment, processing her options. "You realize that exposing me doesn't help Beatrice. Her clinic is still destroyed, her reputation is still ruined." "True, but it does accomplish something else." "What's that?" "It shows everyone exactly what happens when you underestimate the practice husband." The confrontation with Beatrice happened 2 days later at the charity gala for the Children's Hospital, the same venue where this whole mess had started. I'd arranged for both women to receive invitations to an exclusive after-party at Dr. Grant's downtown apartment. Of course, there was no after-party, and Dr. Grant's apartment had been professionally trashed by a cleaning crew I'd hired to accidentally dump his belongings onto the street while he was at work. Beatrice arrived first, still beautiful despite the stress lines around her eyes. She'd lost weight, and her designer clothes hung a little loose. The past month had aged her. "Arthur, what are you doing here? I thought this was Grant's party." "Grant's having some housing issues at the moment. Something about unpaid rent and property damage." She looked around the empty apartment, taking in the missing furniture and the boxes of belongings scattered across the floor. "What did you do?" "Nothing illegal. Just stopped subsidizing his lifestyle. Turns out, when you can't make rent, landlords get impatient." Scarlett arrived 10 minutes later, her usual composure cracking when she saw both of us waiting. "This is a setup," she said. "It's an education," I corrected. "Beatrice, I'd like you to meet your real enemy." For the next 20 minutes, I laid out everything I'd discovered about Scarlett's manipulation, the shell company, the medical board complaints, the systematic destruction of the clinic's reputation. Beatrice listened in growing horror as her best friend's betrayal became clear. "You destroyed my practice," Beatrice whispered. "You pretended to support me while you were sabotaging everything I worked for." "I was protecting you from yourself," Scarlett said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The clinic was failing anyway. Arthur was going to pull his support eventually. Because you were feeding him reasons to—" Beatrice's voice rose. You made him look like the villain while you positioned yourself to profit from my destruction." The argument escalated quickly. Scarlett tried to leave, but Beatrice blocked her path. Words became shouts. Shouts became physical confrontation. A champagne glass flew across the room, shattering against the wall. Hair was pulled, designer clothes were torn. I recorded everything on my phone. The video went viral within hours. "Medical catfight exposes clinic conspiracy" became the trending topic on local social media. The footage of two well-dressed professional women destroying each other in an empty apartment became a symbol of everything wrong with the city's medical elite. By morning, Scarlett's business reputation was destroyed. Her shell company's activities were front-page news, and the medical board launched a formal investigation into her manipulation of their complaint process. Dr. Grant, meanwhile, had been arrested for stealing prescription drugs from the hospital where he still had privileges. Security footage showed him pocketing samples and controlled substances, apparently to sell on the black market to fund his increasingly expensive lifestyle. The three people who'd conspired to humiliate me were now publicly exposed as a fraud, a thief, and a manipulator. But I wasn't finished yet. The final act took place at the medical center's emergency board meeting, called to address the scandal that had engulfed the city's medical community. I arrived uninvited but not unwelcome. My lawyer had reminded them that I was still a major potential donor, despite recent events. The boardroom was packed with the city's medical elite, many of whom had shunned me just weeks earlier. Now they watched me with a mixture of wariness and grudging respect. The practice husband had proven more dangerous than anyone anticipated. Dr. Williams, the chief of staff, called the meeting to order. "We're here to address the recent events involving several prominent members of our medical community, and to discuss how we can restore public confidence in our profession." I stood up. "If I may, I'd like to address the board." Murmurs rippled through the room. Dr. Williams looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Mr. Sterling, you have 5 minutes." I walked to the front of the room, looking out at faces that had once dismissed me as just another rich husband playing at being important. 3 months ago, my wife publicly humiliated me at her clinic opening, calling me her practice husband and handing me divorce papers in front of investors and media. Many of you thought my response was excessive, vindictive, disproportionate. I paused, letting that sink in. You were wrong. My response was educational. It demonstrated something this community had forgotten: respect for the people who make your success possible. Dr. Marcus Webb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Patricia Chen stared at her hands. Dr. Beatrice Sterling built her clinic on my foundation, my money, my connections, my support. When she decided that foundation was disposable, she learned what happens when you kick out your own support structure. I clicked a remote, and the wall screen displayed a financial summary. But the real education wasn't for my wife. It was for all of you. See, you assumed that because I wasn't a doctor, I was somehow less important to this community. You forgot that medicine is a business, and businesses need capital, connections, and strategic thinking. The screen showed a list of my investments in local medical practices, research funds, and hospital expansions. The total was staggering. Over the past 15 years, I've invested $42 million in this city's medical infrastructure. I've funded research, supported expansions, and helped dozens of practices grow. I did this because I believed in the importance of medical excellence. Another click, another screen. This one showed recent withdrawals. In the past month, I've withdrawn $18 million from various medical investments. Not because the practices weren't profitable, but because the practitioners forgot the importance of loyalty and respect. The room was silent. Dr. Webb, your cardiology practice is currently 3 months behind on equipment leases because I called in your loan early. Dr. Chen, your pediatric expansion is stalled because I withdrew my backing. Dr. Rodriguez, your cosmetic surgery center is facing foreclosure because I triggered the acceleration clause in your mortgage. I looked directly at each of them as I spoke. They couldn't meet my eyes. This isn't vindictive behavior. This is business. When you invest in people who then publicly oppose you, you reassess those investments. Dr. Williams cleared his throat. Mr. Sterling, what exactly are you proposing? I'm proposing that this community learn the lesson my wife learned. Foundations matter. The people who support you, who invest in you, who help you succeed, they deserve respect, not dismissal. Another click. The screen showed a new proposal. I'm prepared to reinvest in this community's medical infrastructure. $50 million over the next 5 years, funding research, expansion, and education programs. But this time, the investment comes with conditions. I outlined a comprehensive accountability program, regular financial audits, professional conduct reviews, and strict ethical guidelines. Any practice receiving my funding would be held to the highest standards of both medical care and business conduct. The days of treating donors and investors as disposable ATMs are over. If you want foundation support, you provide foundation respect. The vote was unanimous. Every single board member approved my proposal, including the ones who'd publicly condemned my behavior just weeks earlier. After the meeting, I stood in the parking lot watching the sun set over the city. My phone buzzed with a text from Beatrice. I understand now. I'm sorry. I deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from my lawyer. Scarlett Morrison just agreed to sell her shell company's debt holdings to you at cost. She's also leaving the city. Permanently. Dr. Grant had been sentenced to community service and lost his medical license. He was working at a pharmacy in another state, dispensing other people's prescriptions for $12 an hour. My former friends had learned their lesson about selective loyalty. Marcus had publicly apologized and was slowly rebuilding his practice under my new ethical guidelines. Patricia and Tom were doing the same. And me? I was exactly where I'd always been. The foundation everyone else built their success on. The difference was that now they remembered to be grateful for it. The practice husband had become the permanent foundation, and everyone in the city's medical community understood exactly what that meant. I got in my car and drove home through streets I'd helped build, past medical practices I'd helped fund, in a city that had finally learned to respect the man who made it all possible. They'd called me the practice husband, something temporary and disposable. But foundations aren't practice, they're permanent. And I'd just proven that removing a foundation doesn't just hurt the person who built on it. It brings down everything they thought they'd accomplished. The education was complete.